Welcome everyone to our session today. I'm so excited to be alongside these other folks and sharing some of the really amazing work that's happening in South Carolina. Our session today, From the State House to the Classroom, is going to allow us to do three things. First is to sort of step back and think about what's sort of the strategy for leading change. What are the things we're holding in our mind as we're planning for systems transformation work that's complex, involves humans, and all kinds of interrelated parts. So we'll kind of lift the hood on strategy in South Carolina. Secondly, we'll take a look at a key feature that has supported that transformation work, the competency framework, that reflects the profile of a South Carolina graduate. And then the most exciting part for me here is getting to hear from practitioners. We have folks here in this panel who are going to speak to their work, hands deep in the work, leading the way in this transformation effort. And they have artifacts to share, they have some data points to share, they have stories to share. So I'm hoping that this will be a really exciting and informative conversation for everyone. Let's kick this off with some introductions. My name is Sydney Schaef. I'm Managing Director at reDesign, an education, design, and capacity building organization that partners up with schools and districts and states to help think about transformational change that's learner-centered and to support that design journey and change leadership journey, and to be learners alongside our partners in that work. And we've had the privilege of partnering up with the Office of Personalized Learning at the State Department in South Carolina. It has been such a gift to work with this team. And I'm just excited to be able to speak to this collaboration today. I'll kick it over to you, Stephanie, our amazing partner, for introductions.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Sydney. I appreciate it. I'm Stephanie DiStasio. I'm with the South Carolina Department of Education, Office of Personalized Learning. And we're actually talking about changing the office name to Personalized Competency-Based Learning because of the work we've done with our partners and the work that honestly that the folks in the field are championing and pushing forward. So we're really excited to see that. So I will kick it on over. I see David on my screen next. So David, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Consalvi, and I'm the district STEAM coordinator and coach for Rock Hill School District. And I was fortunate to get involved with working with Stephanie and Sydney in this work. And it's really helped our schools. And I just find it an awesome opportunity to bring those skills part. And we're going to get to a little bit of that profile of the graduate, but it's really thinking about how skills are so valuable to our students. We always hear it in the classroom. And so that's something as a STEAM coordinator, it's really changed how we think about it. It's not just the content, it's really changed how we're thinking about that work. And so I look forward to sharing that today. And I'll say, let's see, I see Mary Roueche, you're up next if you want to.
Hey everyone, my name is Mary Roueche. I'm an educator in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I had the pleasure of working with reDesign and Office of Personalized Learning as a competency fellow for the past 2 years. I also worked with David Consalvi at South Pointe, working with the competencies with high school English students. So I'm really excited to share my experience with you today. And I'm going to send it over to Apryl Henry.
Hi, I'm Apryl Henry. I teach high school ELA at River Bluff High School, and I've used the competencies in my classroom for about 3 years now. And it has definitely changed the way that I teach. And I think it's changed the way that my students learn as well. And I'm going to pass it now to Jennifer Gibbons, who also teaches at River Bluff.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer Gibbons. And yes, I teach math here at River Bluff High School. And we've used the competencies now for us for 4 years in an alternate math class as a different way to see how students are growing and changing instead of just paper and pencil grades.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And all of you who are with us, we're so happy you're here. In the chat, if you can, just drop in who you are, where you're coming from, and what brings you here. What's exciting to you about this session? You had a lot of places to go, so we'd love to hear and tune in to what's top of mind for you. as we jump into our session. Cool. So I'm going to let you go ahead and do that in the chat box. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start with the sort of context setting question for Stephanie, which is, okay, so we're here to talk about change leadership and also like, what does this look like on the ground? But let's start with the sort of what and why. So David mentioned the sort of profile of a South Carolina graduate. That's been our North Star as in this collaboration and in this work. What is that, and how did it get put together? If you could give us like the high level overview to help set the stage for our conversation today. Thanks.
In South Carolina, we have the profile of a South Carolina graduate, and it was created through our state association of school administrators. Superintendents from all of our districts here in South Carolina really heard the call back in 2012 to really begin thinking about how do we know that our students are graduating and ready for the jobs for our state. And so thinking about that workforce development piece, wanted to get out ahead of that and think about what would it look like? What are we hearing? So they worked across communities in our state to really do a grassroots approach to creating this profile of a South Carolina graduate. What does it look like? We have 3 parts: knowledge, world-class skills, and life and career characteristics. And so once the profile was created, it was codified, it was adopted by our legislature. So it is a statewide profile. And what the competencies bring to us, and the thing that we're most excited about, is finally having a way to really look at those 2/3 of the profile that often were hard to get our hands around. And so really thinking about how do we bring those skills and characteristics to life, and what does it look like for that to take place in action within every possible content area. So that's a quick background and quick overview of our profile, but we are certainly excited to ground our competencies in that, because it really takes that profile and makes it actionable.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So that's the context. How do we make this? How do we bring this thing to life? What do we mean when we say these things that are part of our learner profile, and how do we measure them? Like, that's a really important question from an equity perspective and just a quality of the system, right? Is this working as well as we need it to? So I'm thrilled to take a few minutes to share with you sort of the blueprint or the architecture behind the change effort that's underway in South Carolina. And I'm especially excited to share this because I believe it's truly been a synthesis of like best of literature on change leadership in the field, plus like real life, what we're learning in real time. And I don't reDesign put this framework together, but really it was through our partnership with South Carolina that this came to be. Here's the big picture overview. There are a lot of frameworks out there on change leadership. Ours is not the first. It won't be the last. But there are a few things that we felt were missing out there in the literature that kind of brought in a sort of consolidated framework that we have represented here. And again, this very much reflects our learning in partnership with practitioners and Stephanie and her team at the Office of Personalized Learning. First and foremost, I want to draw to your attention this idea of a collective vision and purpose. Who is at the table in deciding what is our vision for our learning system? And as you just heard from Stephanie, it truly was an effort to bring diverse perspectives and stakeholders to the table in developing the profile. And then that commitment to collective vision carried through in how we constructed the competency framework itself. Lots of eyes on the work, lots of voices shaping the work, lots of hands continuing to contribute to this framework that's a living framework for the state. Okay, so who sets vision, right? This notion of a collective and an inclusive process that is ongoing. It's not static. We continue to be committed to meaningful stakeholder engagement to shape the work and the vision. So that's one thing that we felt was sort of missing. Not that no one's talking about collective vision, but just in terms of sort of the change leadership literature. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is this relationship between systems design and adult development. This is something at reDesign we lived in our kind of origin story of doing instructional coaching and school transformation in New York City, where we realized when you're trying to change stuff, systems design, like the architecture of your system, so your policies, the way you think about schedule, your curriculum, your assessments, like all the things that make up your design have to be carefully interconnected with your adult development strategy. And often, especially at the state level, it can be tricky to invest in real meaningful adult development, right? That's not typically the conception for what the state's role is. But if we're going to try to lead transformation at the state level, we have to attend to the humans who are in the work. And if this is a new design, right, then we have to attend to the new capabilities, the new paradigms, right, the way we think about the work. And support that learning side by side with systems design. And this is where we get into like, how do we really stage the work? Think about like what has to happen now, what has to happen next, and to be responsive and to be adaptive as we're seeing what's happening in our adult development strategy. What are we now ready for? What systems design features can we change because we're ready for it? And vice versa, as we think about introducing a change to our systems design. And I'll give you a concrete example we're going to look into together today, this competency framework, right? This brand new thing that we're claiming is like how we make the profile actionable. What? If that's the systems design feature that we're changing, what is the adult development strategy to ensure folks are supported in this new change? So we're taking this lens of learning and development in the introduction of this new systems feature, not one of punitive, like you got to do this and we're going to evaluate you, right? It's truly a learning lens, a learning focus. So the thing I want to call to your attention here that we didn't see out there in other frameworks was not that each of these things aren't important. It's just like, introduce a change to your system, teach people, skill up your team, but really the relationship between these two. One cannot get too far ahead of the other. And so keeping those things interconnected in a strategic way is something we wanted to call out here in this framework. And that we've learned on the ground in our work in Partnership South Carolina. The last thing I want to call to your attention about the framework is this culture of care and learning. Lots of people are talking about culture. That's not new, but we're putting a stake in the ground on two things. Like if you're going to be intentional about cultivating culture, do two things. Help people feel deeply cared for in the work and create a culture that nurtures learning. We know from neuroscience now that our brains are hardwired for threat detection. Like that's human, that's survival. That makes sense. That's healthy. That's normal. When we introduce change, right, something that's different, those alarms in our bodies can go off and say like, wait a second, this is new. This is different. I'm uncertain about this. Is my status changing in my school? Do I have the skills I need to do this? How does this, is this all the things, right? All the things happening literally in our nervous system when something gets changed. When we're leading change at the system level, we have to center the humans, we believe. And so inside of this change effort, we need to continue to center connectedness for humans, care for humans, and experiences that sort of like reduce anxiety, right? And help people enter a space where they can learn. There's a lot we can learn about how to do that. What I really want to name here is that's when we talk about culture and change leadership, that's not typical. Like people aren't like, yeah, like make people feel really cared for, but it works. It's powerful. And we've seen that thread woven through this change journey in South Carolina where people, and this is not about redesign. This is like, people are saying, I feel cared for. I feel heard and responded to. I feel like the investment that Office of Personalized Learning is really about our best interests and responsive to our needs and in tune with like what we're trying to accomplish here in our unique context relative to this collective vision. So like shout outs to the Office of Personalized Learning for their very human-centered approach. And that's something too at reDesign that we really, we feel very, very strongly about. Okay, building a culture of care and learning. Okay, so that's sort of the change leadership framework. I just want to pause and give folks in the chat box an opportunity to pose any clarifying questions before we move on. We're going to zoom into systems design and adult development, and then talk about the work and hear from our practitioners on the call. Any clarifying questions or connections those are cool too. If anything is resonating. And Stephanie, please jump in. Is there anything you would add to this as you think about your, you leading this work and this change strategy?
Nothing major other than to say, we often ask the question, as a state agency, as a director in a state agency, like, what's the role of the state? And we really had to wrestle with and think about what, if we want to do something that truly is different, then we're going to have to think about the way we approach that very differently. And so trying to find and strike that balance has been a journey, and it's been a lot of fun. But I will say it is very rewarding as we dive into it. I think you're going to hear a lot more of it. It's really rewarding to build something that works for the educators in our state in a time when teacher retention and recruitment is on the forefront everywhere, and we're thinking about what that means. I think it's really helpful to continue to try and design things that meet those needs. And most importantly, and I think you're going to see it as we talk through this, by taking this approach to change leadership, what we're really getting out of the work is a much stronger product than we could have ever designed at the state level. So really being open to that, that collective vision and purpose, and thinking about adult development and thinking about ourselves as learners in the system as well. Even though you're trying to lead, you're also trying to learn. And so that has been a fun journey to go on.
Love it. Love it. I'm seeing folks in the chat. I'm just making some connections here. Marcia, Steve, Shannon, folks who are Mike, this new rollout you've just done the profile. That's amazing. I'm just, maybe you could be thinking about, okay, we've done this collective visioning piece. What are these other things that we need to attend to as we think about the rollout? Anyway, so just like little pins to put in or little seeds to plant, I guess, to think about, your sort of broader strategy and holding these different kind of elements. All right. So for the purpose of this session, we're going to focus in on one systems design feature, and then 2 adult development, kind of strategic programs that connect directly with the systems design feature. So the systems design feature we're going to jump into is the competency framework. Again, the sort of tool that we can use to ensure clarity and consistency in how we understand the developmental journey toward this profile, and give us a tool for measuring growth in just really concrete ways and supporting learning. So that's the systems design feature. And then the adult development programs are, how do we help awesome educators in South Carolina who want to implement this new change, this new feature? What does the support look like? What's the model? So hopefully this will offer a little bit of insight that maybe can get you, give you some things to think about for those of you who are like in this work. You have the slides. There's a little more like prompts to think about each of these elements. I just talked these through. So let's now go into the competency framework. I know some of you have seen this before, what the framework is. I want to start with like, what was our process to kind of pull back into the change leadership framework? How did we do this? It wasn't like me sitting in a room, in a dark lit room, like looking at the research and trying to, like, we got stakeholders together. We showed them models from the field. Tell us what you think, respond. What do you like? What do you dislike? We went to the literature. We researched not just the what is critical thinking and what is creativity, but like, what is an equity grounded engagement with the research look like? If the profile is to ensure access and opportunity for everybody, like maybe we should be looking at something that doesn't feel connected to the framework directly per se, but like an economic mobility study. Like wow, social networks play a really huge part in my ability to, get a better job and build a better life for me and my family. Okay, well, there's a lot that's outside of the locus of a learner's control that we won't put on them because we believe the system matters. But what is inside of the locus of control of learners and students? And how can that knowledge shape our competency framework? Something that is about skill development, as David said, and building learners' agency through competency development. So we had a deep stakeholder discovery process, bringing a lot of folks together. We engaged the research. We brought a prototype back. Folks spoke to that prototype. We were excited because people people were into it. And so we did real fine tuning, and then it was okay, time to field test. We introduced a new feature. Now we got to get it in people's hands so they can use it. But it's not just about field testing. This is a new thing. So what is the adult development strategy going to look like? Before we jump to that, here's the competency framework. Again, I know some of you have seen this, but these are the 12 competencies that reflect those two parts of the profile Stephanie mentioned, the sort of world-class skills and life and career characteristics. These are not the disciplinary content, the important knowledge that lives in the world-class knowledge domain. These are companions to that knowledge, right? These are the transferable skills that help us learn that knowledge really well without being dependent on a teacher, right? They give us agency in our current learning, and they also prepare us for post-secondary life, right? In our rapidly changing dynamic world. You'll notice that these are sort of whole child. So these are not like, oh, this is traditional academic stuff. Like we really leaned into the literature and to our own sort of wisdom as a community and the stakeholder group. Like, what do we want people to be able to, our young people to be able to do? So things like sustaining wellness and navigating conflict and building networks, as I mentioned, the economic mobility studies we engaged with earlier. This is sort of attending to the whole child, the whole human. And they don't live in one discipline. They're sort of cut across disciplines, which allows for, when we know about competency development, we need the opportunity to learn things, not just multiple opportunities, but we need the opportunity to transfer that learning in diverse contexts. So being able to lead teams in different contexts is important. Being able to design solutions across disciplinary contexts is how we build expertise. So let's design the system to support that. You can tell I'm like not excited at all about this. Stephanie, anything you want to say about the framework itself? Keep rolling.
Yeah, keep rolling. I will drop in a link. So if folks want to see on our website, to dig in, we have it in various formats, the competencies, lots of resources around them. So I'll drop that link in.
Right on. Okay. And then I'm going to give one more like quick bit of like insight into the framework, because this will help you kind of make sense, I think, of the actual artifacts and things that our practitioners are going to share today. But every competency, like example here, learning independently, is broken down into a set of skills that are derived from the research we engage. Like we needed definitional research. Like what does it mean to learn independently? So we pulled on frameworks around, for example, self-regulated learning to define learning independently as the ability to set goals and make plans and then monitor progress and adjust. And then for each of those skills, we have developmental continuums, right? Some people call these rubrics, but it's not like a proficiency scale. Every level is a place to celebrate, is an accomplishment, and they build on each other. So like the things you do in level 1 are the precursor to the things you'll be able to do in level 2 and so forth. In the South Carolina competency framework, there are 6 levels. They're not attached to grade levels or grade bands. They are developmental levels that span pre-K to pre-professional. All right, so that's sort of the architecture of the framework itself. And okay, so now let's step back. That's the systems design thing, the new thing we introduced into the system, a new design into the system. How do we support that other important intersecting part in our change leadership strategy, the adult development part, how we support folks in the work of that? So I'm going to share 2 of our programs in South Carolina that are like laser focused on adult development specific to that systems design feature. The first is, well, I'm sorry, this is high level. Yeah, same kind of thing. Sorry, same sort of stakeholder engagement to figure out what the strategy should be for adult development. And then on the right here, you can see there are a bunch of different things that happen. So there's an intensive supports coaching program. We'll talk about that as one of the models. Virtual and in-person workshop series, just like building background knowledge, right? Getting people into the framework and understanding its connections to the profile. We've been building DIY implementation toolkits, like hot off the press. We just did a like research and evaluation toolkit for practitioners on, if you're using the framework, here's how you can study. Our kids learn, is there growth around the competencies? How are mindsets changing? How is the experience like of connectedness and agency and support changing? Really excited about that toolkit. School tours, community, like lots of things happen in the sort of adult development band. I want to focus on our intensive supports coaching program and our fellowship, our competency fellows program. You have these slides. I want to get into the practitioner pieces, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. This was an intentional, again, design around adult development strategy. It can't be a one and done thing. So in key inputs, it's a multi-year journey. It can't just be individual teachers working in silos, right? We really need a coherent strategy, ideally where leadership is deeply engaged alongside teachers who are doing this work in their classrooms with young people. And you'll notice here a key input, like building a culture of care and learning for the adults, but also for the young people in the experience. We don't want to slap on new policies for grading policies, for example, around competencies that are actually punitive if we're not ready, if we're not ready for policy change. So really we started with practice. What are the pedagogical practices that are essential to competency development? You can see this middle column, key practices. How do we set learning goals in the classroom using the competency framework when we're beholden to standards too? How do those work together coherently? How do we take that? What's the right bite size? How do we integrate it? How do we build culture through these new practices? And then how do we facilitate meaningful learning? So teaching skills explicitly, engaging learners in discourse and collaboration around the competencies, supporting, the feedback and conferencing that is essential to learning, right? Dialogue around your learning and feedback and so forth, right? So we named these concrete practices. And then we thought a lot about like, what should we measure? And full transparency, in year one, we didn't know what to measure. We're like, let's just gather data and sort of let this emerge. And then we took those themes that emerged, and then we said, now we're going to use those to design the pre and post. Will we really see growth if we measure these things that emerge? So this, even the R&E sort of frame has been emergent, which has been really cool and fun. So that's the sort of intensive coaching program, multi-year school, like close touch support work. There are folks on the panel here today who can speak to that coaching work with a laser focus on practices that tie into culture, right? When the interactions change, other things change too. So that's the intensive coaching program, 3 years. And we've had multiple schools engage in this coaching program. The second adult development program I want to share is a competency fellows program. This was like, let's invite people across the state who are influencers, lead teachers, folks at the district office who are, driving innovation or holding curriculum and assessment, school leaders who are trying to lead make the profile actionable in their context. Let's bring them together in a 2-year cohort model. So we're learning from each other, lots of cross-pollination happening. Let's design a program that reflects competency-based learning. You're going to learn stuff and build stuff and collaborate and try it out in your contexts. And let's focus on some core tools for implementation, knowing that you're going to adapt them for your own context, right? This is not a fixed thing, it's a living thing, but we want to level set on some core tools and methods. We built a learning arc, we have specific metrics. So that's another sort of program that's evolved over the years, which has been exciting. We have some folks from the program here today to speak to that. So that was the second one we want to feature today, this Competency Fellows program. How do we support learning the thing and then leading change in your own context that's responsive to your needs and the unique opportunities that are in your in your realm of influence. I'm going to pause there. I said a lot of words. Stephanie, I want to invite you around those two, big picture adult development strategy or the coaching program and the Competency Fellows program. Is there any other context you want to share or insight you want to offer before we get into what does this look like for practitioners?
The only thing I would say is we're choosing to highlight both of these because I think they are critical and pivotal. That they were the thing that we knew from the get-go we needed. But as you saw on Sydney's previous slide, we still took a multi-layered approach. As we got into it, we tried to really listen and hear what other approaches, supports, resources do we need to develop to be able to move this forward. And so as a good example, some of the DIY implementation toolkits that we've created are a direct result of the competency fellows where we're really thinking about the importance of replication. What have we learned from the competency fellows that folks in their schools might need at their fingertips if they are not a member of competency fellows or they're not in intensive coaching, to be able to get this off the ground in their own school in a really positive way. So I think it's really important to just name that those supports and resources are critical.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. There's a question in the chat from Nate. Are you seeing districts use the progressions exactly as they are or modify them? What a wonderful question. It's a both and. a lot of folks are like, thank you for building this stuff. Yes, we're going to take it and run. And then there are cases where folks are like, we want to have our fingerprint on this, or we have an additional thing that we would add to the profile that's like, you know, entrepreneurship or something that's particular to the context. And so we've actually in South Carolina, we've had the opportunity to move through a learning series with the district that was like, we want to adapt the framework and kind of make it our own. And so it was a process of pulling in the state level framework, but kind of adding and contextualizing theirs. We're in the process of building a toolkit to support a process for folks who want to modify, but you know, we want to ensure like the research base, for example, that inform the framework isn't compromised by the modifications that we're making, or you know, attend to the validity of the tools, et cetera. So we don't have a perfect answer here, but we're excited to create a process that folks can move through to support them when they feel that that's important to their community. But I would say, in my perspective, it seems like most folks are just really grateful to have like a stable set of tools that makes that 30,000 foot view profile of a graduate something that's very, very ground zero. Like literally, I can build my rubrics for the next unit that's coming, or my checklist or my success criteria, like just pulling in the language and creating my student facing tool, and maybe adding a little bit of context about like the disciplinary stuff or task specific guidance. But the skills themselves and the language that describes how those develop for assessment, for goal setting, for reflection, for instructional design, it's all there, and it really calibrates the whole system around that. Cool. All right. Yes. Thanks, Nate. Sorry, economy of words is not my.
Joy put a question in the chat that's a perfect segue, because she's interested in how teachers and schools are balancing the subject requirements and the competencies. And I think that's exactly what we're about to dive into.
That is wonderful. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to just open it up. I think that would be a really fun question to start with. What do you do with this thing alongside the standards? So I'm going to open this up to our practitioners. If anyone wants to jump in, and I'm just going to ask, like, I have a couple core questions. So I'm going to, you know, we'll maybe have one or two people respond to the question, then we'll keep moving. But I'd love to hear if you have a sort of answer to this question around striking the balance of holding standards and competencies in your instructional design and practice. Who is willing to jump us in with this juicy question?
I can start.
Thanks, April. Yay.
Yeah. So, again, I'm an English teacher, and the competencies, they just fit so nicely with what we try to do in ELA. So it started out with me teaching a class called Prep Lab, which is for ninth graders who they might have gaps in where they should be as far as reading and writing. And so I started using it in that classroom, and I just realized that also in the English 2 content area that I could also use it there. So for instance, the competencies for reading critically and expressing ideas, they're very easy to kind of blend in with what we want to do. So currently they're writing a narrative, and, you know, the narrative is about what are you hiding behind your mask. I need them to be able to tell me that. I'm not really looking for, you know, I'm looking for how well they can tell me a story, and the expressing ideas kind of continuum just really helps them see where, okay, maybe I'm not here yet, but I'm not getting an F on this assignment because it's about growth over grades. And so they have some sort of, you know, like they know what they need to work on to get to the next level. So I also teach a class called Multimedia Publications, which, you know, we use media standards for that one, but I just have found that the competencies work a lot better. So still yet using those expressing ideas. Right now we're starting to create projects for Native American History Month. And again, it's however you want to celebrate, but because there's no kind of like set rubric or guidelines that they have to follow, I'm telling them that they can, you know, choose however they want to create a presentation. So they are, you know, doing everything from like a display in the library to bookmarks to something to showcase on our TVs, but they're all being kind of assessed on that same expressing ideas continuum, and, you know, just showcasing where they are. and hopefully getting better with each project that I do. So it really, I just feel like they just go hand in hand, and it's not really doing anything extra, because the competencies I feel like are what we need to make our students understand the standards better.
Apryl, thank you so much. I'm going to offer two metaphors for how to think about the relationship between the two. It's either a fruit salad or it's an apple pie. So sometimes the competencies, like expressing ideas, right? We have standards on writing and communication and discussion, right? In that case, I think it's much more of the apple pie model. Like you kind of mix them all in. I love to bake pies. You kind of mix them all in and it's all good. It works. There's like a, we're speaking to the same skills. In other cases, it's much more like a fruit salad where in my academic standards, I don't have anything on navigating conflict. So, but that's something I want to prioritize in this unit I'm about to plan for on whatever the thing is that's covering standards. And so really now it's a combination of different things, right? That are fundamentally different, the navigating conflict skills, and whatever the disciplinary context is. Does anyone else want to speak to this and the kind of nuts and bolts of how it works? Do you choose 5 competencies for a unit? Do you like, how does this really work on the ground? Don't use 5 competencies is my unsubtle bit of advice here.
I'll add in, when I think about it from the school level and then what I see in the classroom is it's really about, first, when you're breaking down your standards and looking at what's in the standard, a lot of the competencies, those skills are embedded. So teachers are encouraged to kind of look for those skills already. But then it's also the needs within the classroom. So you mentioned about navigating conflict. That's not necessarily going to show up in my standard, but it's a need in my classroom. And so it gives a teacher a support option as to how can I integrate this more seamlessly. And so, right, you wouldn't, and I would say you wouldn't even necessarily integrate the whole competency.
Right.
You look for the skills
Yes.
within the competency. So we're looking at the large picture, but what skills do I need? And then working with teachers to make it fit. So if the verbiage is not exactly what I need it to be for the unit or lesson, it's okay. And we do, like you said, we maintain the efficacy or, the foundation of the competency itself, but you put it in terms that works for your students and the unit that you're trying to get. And I think our teachers have actually, that's the shift we really had to let them see, is that we're not telling you use this way. It's here's how you can use this. And basically, once you start, it's kind of hard. It's like, where's this been all my life? And so it's that model. And so once they really get in, it's like, this is what I've needed, because it is that part of the standard that is so difficult. We learn our content, but actually teaching the skills and having the tools to support my teaching of the skills, that's what this really brings together. And teachers are finding that to be the useful side of it.
David, thank you so much. That was like for the quote wall. Please keep dropping your questions in the chat. We have other questions we were planning to move into. I just want to share one other little nuance on implementation around this relationship between standards and competencies, which is you have to decide your starting point, but you got to get to alignment. So you can start with standards and you can unpack the standard just like teachers know how to do, and examine the language and say, which of these words in the standard point to skills that are discipline specific or transferable, and which of these words in the standard point to knowledge, like what learners are going to need to know how to do. And then looking at that skill language, is there a competency that's really aligned to that, to the essence of the standard, what we're getting to? And that's how we kind of match, right? So you want to match standard to competency, and then ensure your assessment, which has to be performance-based if you're going to use these continuums, because these are all higher order Bloom's stuff. We'll use so it's this like happy, I don't know, like the good kind of triangle. The other way to approach it, if you have the flexibility in your program, is to start with a competency and say, I'm going to do a unit on leadership, on leading teams. And then say, okay, well, what is the disciplinary content that I could integrate into this unit that's focused on these important transferable skills? And then again, make sure the assessment aligns. So standard, competency, performance assessment. You could also start with the performance assessment. If you're at the district and it's like, this is the thing we have to do. Okay, Okay, let's unpack it. What are the sort of transferable skills that are essential to being successful in the assessment? How can the competency framework help? Call me up if you don't see something in this framework that can help you. Call me up. I'll put my number in the chat. Okay, no, my email. You can have my email. When we're closer, you can have it. And then same thing with standards, like in the performance assessment, what's the disciplinary content that is being pointed to? But anyway, that's the triangle. But it's, depending on your system and how much flexibility you have, you can start at any one of those places. But then, in part of the program that we've been running in both of these instances, in the fellows program and in the coaching program, we teach the sort of unpack, match, align process. Everybody knows that methodology. It's like unpack the thing, whatever you're starting with, do the matching and align the assessment. So we have these sort of simple methods and tools that help people kind of make meaning and put this stuff into practice that we've built. reDesign didn't have those things going in all the time. It was like, what do they need? And let's build the thing. And so a lot of those resources have been put together, to Stephanie's point, now being codified in these toolkits, these sort of DIY toolkits that sort of take the best of assets and ideas and methods over the years and make those accessible to everybody. Okay, other questions? Let's look in the chat box. Cool. Okay, if you have questions, drop them. Some of you prepared slides. I want to make sure we do get to those. Since I don't see any questions at the moment, I want to pop back into our deck and let's take a look at a few of these artifacts. So explicit skill instruction. This is one of those core practices in both of these programs that we emphasize. Like, how do we help learners develop competency without being like truly in an equitable way where everybody has access? Like, we know kids are coming in with different levels of exposure. We just feel like explicit instruction of the actual skill through modeling or inquiry or like that's just, it's a fundamental, no matter what your instructional model is, there are some practices that are just essential to competency development. Explicit skill and strategy instruction is one of them. Who can jump in? I'll
jump in, Sydney.
Thank you, Mary. Yay. Okay, over to you. Tell us what we're looking at.
Sure. Yeah. So I wanted to give the audience a look into my classroom, basically, and how I use the competencies. And a couple of things I wanted to say about the skill progression. Two things that I really valued and liked about it were the fact that they were student facing, which sometimes our standards are not, and they're all positively framed. And so it's really helpful when you're looking at that developmental lens and looking at how to help kids use them in a positive way. Another thing that I really liked about them is they help you realize the breakdown to get to the level 6. And so what you're looking at here is an example of how I use them in an upper level English class, an AP level English class. And so often the different skills written to the competencies are helpful for students to self-assess. They lend themselves to thinking metacognitively. And so I would often use them with my students to kind of reflect on their performance or assess their kind of growth goals and things like that. And so I wanted to show you two ways. One where I blended the competency of reading critically with an AP English standard, but then also how it kind of forced me to chunk and move back a level. So you're looking at two self-assessment questions on the left-hand side there that came from a Google form I'd given students. And what we were working on is this big idea of how we evaluate context and point of view and author's purpose. And that is so large. But what we ask kids to do as readers is figure out what are the details that give us understanding of purpose. And, as I'm an educator and I'm reading over what students are producing and I'm listening to them talk and then looking at how they're reading, because how they're writing, all of these things are intertwined. We read, we talk, we write. I'm thinking about how I need to move back a couple of progressions in the skill continuum. And that's what I really love about using the competencies is the breakdown for you, and that there's not this negativity about moving backwards sometimes. Sometimes that's where we need to go. And if you think about brain-based learning and all of the components that are important to helping students learn and are how we learn, the competencies help you get there. So the idea of chunking and focusing, moving toward cognitive strategies that all students can use. You know, we kind of demystify school and structures for kids. It really is equity based. And if you've got teachers in your schools or in your districts who are working toward that, this is a really great resource and place for them to be. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see a hierarchy of how I used standard in the reading critically competency. And so at the top, we're looking at analyzing purpose. And that is the big idea. That's the big goal. But we have to look at part to whole. And so we move back down and we look at one of the level 3 skills in the reading critically competency. And that level 3 bullet there is, when I read, I can use strategies such as questioning, inferring, connecting to make meaning of the story source. So what I wanted students to do is I wanted them to concentrate on what reading strategy they were actually using to then identify details. So that would help me understand when I'm giving feedback, or I'm looking at what they produce as writers, or I'm listening to the conversations they have in book club. That gives me an idea of where they are looking at part to whole. So as we were moving up the continuum and trying to get to this big part where we were analyzing the relationship between source and the historical or contemporary context, I was able to give better feedback and navigate my next steps as a facilitator, as a teacher, when my kids were having book club discussions or when they were then moving to writing. And so this is just kind of like one snapshot of how I use them in class. And Sydney, if you go to the next slide, I have just an example. Oh, not on the, well, yeah, the next slide in the presentation. Yeah, you can kind of see what I ended up doing with students was breaking down for myself, okay, what are strategies we use as readers? And so if just something to think about, in an upper level AP English class, we kind of make the assumption a lot of times that our 12th grade readers are readers who are most likely moving on into college in the next year, that they already have these skills down. We don't always go back to them to make sure they understand what it is they're doing as readers. And so I also like this about my use with the competencies, that it forced me as the educator to remember, what do we need to explicitly point out to our learners that are then going to help them be better readers and better writers and stronger at the next step they take in their educational career. And so you can see here, this was just a quick look at the strategies my students said they were using. And again, I would use this to then think about, what is my feedback to my book club groups as they discuss? What's my feedback as I'm looking at the writing they produce? So Sydney, that's me, my snapshot of using read critically competency.
Mary, this is truly like, it's truly amazing. Like, so a few things are standing out to me. One is like the quality of the continuums matters a lot, right? Like the design itself of the tool. Part of the research base that informed the literacy competencies was that of the importance of literacy strategies, right? The things that our brains are doing to make meaning of texts, right? And so by design, those were explicitly named in the continuums. And then you have, amazing educator Mary, who's like, I am going to really break these indicators down. I'm going to use them to design the learning experiences and the assessment tools, and use the data from the learning to gain more insight into what my learners need. Like, what strategies are they aware of? What strategies are they using now? What's my next move? And I'm also just really appreciating your point. Like this, I find this to be really true. Just as you said, by the time young people are in high school, these sort of foundational skills, it's just assumed. We operate as though they got it already, or they know it already. And then it's kind of mystifying when like they're struggling to make meaning of a text that's like higher level text. And it's like, actually, no, we can go back to the research on this one and figure out why this reader is struggling. And we can actually have tools to support us in understanding where they are and to be able to measure their growth. So I'm just appreciating that, like, truly equity in practice, right? Like, we have to make this accessible to everybody. And part of that is understanding where they are. And you, with such precision and care, are doing that for your students. Yeah, really awesome. Thank you, Mary, so much for this window into your world. I'm going to move to the next. Oh, sorry. I don't know why that keeps. What's the next slide here? Cool. Algebra prep. Over to you, Jennifer.
So to give you a little bit of context, this is a class that we started 4 years ago as a support level for our underachieving Algebra 1 students. And we were looking for a way to, in South Carolina, if you're going to have a class that's going to earn a credit, they have to have a grade. But we didn't want it to just be another place where kids had to go skill and drill and do math and receive paper and pencil grades. And so we did an in-depth coaching cycle that we jumped into the competencies and said, well, what if we use those? How could we use those to help drive our grades? And it ended up being, when we looked at it, it's about kids talking about what level they currently are and how they can grow themselves to be in a different level. And so it wasn't about, oh, well, you're 100 if you got a level 5 and you're 70 if you're at a level 3. It truly was, I need to see growth and I need to see you talk about your struggles in that competency. How did you overcome those struggles? What are some of the evidences that you have in our prep lab and in your actual Algebra 1 classes that showed how you grew yourself through these levels? And that was kind of first year. And then second year, it was really, it turned the way that I was thinking about how I did structure within the class, that we started looking at the data analysis strand. And we said, how do we build our actual lessons to start out at a level 2, and then our next activity was a level 3, and then our next activity was a level 4, and how can we actually design things that students do that help them grow? And so it just was really kind of mind-blowing for me that, you know, how do I change my teaching styles to match these competencies that we have? Oh, wait, if you might have some questions.
Profound. Yeah, please drop questions in the chat. I just want to name something that I'm appreciating so much, Jennifer, about this. Not that this is wrong, like that other people do this. Like, we live in a standards-based world, so I get it. I get it. There's a tendency to take this developmental progression and slap on a traditional rating scale to it because it's the easiest way to translate and get a grade. So I understand that that's some people need to do that. There are other ways to get to grade composition that doesn't involve applying a standards-based system to a competency, like a skill continuum. But I'm just appreciating the way you've, like, in your design, preserved the intention and this intention of a developmental continuum, and not like, that's okay, level 4 is the thing, and then I'm going to apply a proficiency scale, which is like, nope, not there yet, or like, you're almost there, but you're not there yet. Here's what's missing, right? Like, we're not playing that game. It's not like what's most useful. And from an equity perspective, what is most efficacy building for young people is for them to have experiences of success, right? A mastery experience is what Bandura called it in the 70s, where I can see visible evidence of my growth on a manageable bite size of learning. You've taken the design of this continuum, which is intended to cultivate or create, it's a tool to cultivate efficacy in learners, right? A sense of their power as learners. And you've said, I'm not going to play the game of standards-based grading using this tool. I'm going to let this be used for really understanding where learners are, and by design, supporting their growth in a non-punitive way. So to me, that is so huge. What's that?
It took multiple times with students for them to understand, please don't just rate yourself at the highest level, because that's not what this is about. You know, and so we did this kind of threefold. They did a pre-test at the very beginning of the year to rate themselves. They rated themselves mid-year, and then they rated themselves at the end of the year. And it was funny that a lot of our kids rated themselves high at the beginning of the year, because they want to, you know, be high. That's what they're talking about. And then mid-year, they scored much lower and they said, oh, that's because I didn't really understand what you were talking about. And then to see them actually mid-year to the end of the year, that's where you saw them really talk about their real growth and what they were doing.
That is so amazing. Like, just so amazing. That is a rational response, right? For young people to say, like, let me mark myself as high as I can, because the system, right, penalizes you for not being at whatever the kind of arbitrary like expectation is based on your age, or as Sir Ken Robinson says, your manufacturing date, right? And so you like create, it took the whole year, right, or whatever, to like create the environment and for them to believe that it was real, like that it was true, that it was okay for them to be where they were. Like, that's just profound, Jennifer. So amazing. So amazing.
Sydney, I
Yes.
know that we are, I know we're getting short on time and we need to wrap up.
We do.
I want to point out, and you can come back to this too, in the slide deck that everybody has, if you want to see some of the things teachers and kids are saying about this work, there's a whole section on results.
Mm-hmm.
But before Sydney like dives into that and wraps up, I also just wanted to name something that I hope people are also taking away from this, which is we truly built these competencies to be developmental and to be used pre-K to pre-professional in any content area and with all students. And just in this tiny example that we had, you heard how it works and is in practice with upper level AP students at the high school, and also students who are struggling coming into high school with what they're coming in for Algebra 1. And so you're really able to see we're really trying to make sure that we have built something that truly works at all levels of the system for all kids, regardless of both content area and regardless of just sort of where they may be coming from in their learning journey. And so I think that's a powerful piece that always gets me really excited when we can have something. Imagine what it does for a student's psyche to say, we're using the same set of competencies that they're using in the AP English class. And for that to be something that's universal across the school or the district, and for students to really own and understand that it's about them being able to show what they can do with the content, with the standards, whatever those standards or content are that they're working with.
Yeah. And hopefully one day with tools like this, we won't have to set fixed groups, right? Where there is an AP class, where we're all working on these competencies wherever we are. And there can be real flexibility about that. We are at time. I want to thank Apryl, David, Mary, and Jennifer for sharing your work with us today. I know that you've been this has been a multi-year journey for you. I'm inspired and appreciative that you were willing to take the time to make this visible to all of us. Super beautiful. And yeah, there's a survey that we want to make sure you get a chance to do. So we were asked to leave a few minutes at the end. Now's the time. The results section is in the slide deck. That's just some of the early impact data on our program. So feel free to take a peek. But around these themes of learner growth and agency and mindset shifts and efficacy, we saw some really, really profound things that then inspired our sort of research and evaluation toolkit. So there's some contact info in the back. We'd love to stay connected. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We love to talk about the work and the learning along the way. So thank you, everyone.